ideas, your insights, and those of other from the public. Being sent to one or more apps. Okay, it's also live streaming. There we go. All right. Wonderful. All right, so it's great to have you all here today. Meet on meeting 3 of DLCD's farm stand rulemaking, their advisory committee. And we're looking forward to a conversation today. Just quickly looking at the agenda, we're going to be talking about, you are going to be talking about the discussion on prepared foods and what is it and what is it not in this context, in the context of farm stands. And then also we'll have some time for public comments and then move on to the discussion on the impacts to neighboring farms. And I want to start by thanking so many of you for sending in. Oh, there's Lindsay Ing as well. Hi, Lindsay. I want to thank you for sending in so many thoughtful comments. It's been really, really wonderful to watch the conversation and the thoughts that you each are having individually, and then starting to see how those are starting to knit together or might be able to knit together into something that staff can draft about this. So I want to just welcome you all. We'll do introductions here in just a moment. Just want to remind everybody, well, I guess we'll have that next. So we'll do the introductions first. Let's find out who's here. It's all about relationships and building rapport with each other. So let's start there. If you're a member of the public, remember that we would invite you to introduce yourself here quickly, and then turn your cameras off. So imagine that the people who are on the committee are sitting at a table. If you're at the table, and Hillary is going to be doing a presentation, and I'll be facilitating. So I'd like to ask everybody sitting at the table to have your cameras on, and then the people who are part of the public or just here listening, go ahead and keep your cameras off, okay? You're welcome to keep the camera on if you're a member of staff that just wants people to know that you're here. So I just want to let you know that. Okay, so let's start with, I'm going to start on my list. So let's see, is Alice here? Because that might help us figure out who's missing as well. Alice? Not here yet. Austin is not here yet. Charles, let's start with you.
Hi, Charles Bennett, Jackson County Planning.
Great, thank you. And we'll just start with just your names and who you're representing today. I know I've asked other things, but you're getting to know each other, so I won't put you all on the spot. So let's see, Emily Iverson.
Hi everyone. Emily, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Thanks.
Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm.
Great, thank you. All right, and Eric Walker.
Yes, Eric Walker, Community Development Director, Hood River County.
Thank you, Eric. And Graham.
Graham Fordyce, Fordyce Farm, Inc.
Great, thank you. And Inga.
Hi, Inga Williams with Union County. Planner.
Planner, good, thanks. Yeah, I was thinking I should have asked you to say, what is the ink? So Graham, can I jump back to Graham? You said Inc., Fortis Farm Inc. What is your involvement with this? Why are you here?
So Inc. is incorporated. So we have a farm,
And a farm
multiple
stand?
farms and multiple farm stands and a kitchen.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. That's what I think would be useful for everybody to be reminded of that. And then Inga said she was with Union County Planning. Great. Jim Johnson, where are you? There you are.
Hello, everyone. Jim Johnson, Working Lands Policy Director, 1000 Friends of Oregon.
Super. Thank you, Jim. Justin.
Yes, Justin Throne with the Klamath County Planning Department.
Great. Thank you. Did Lauren pop in here while we were chatting? No. And she's not going to be here, and you already told me that. Sorry, Hillary. I can tell by the look on your face, like. Lindsay Ing.
Lindsay Eng, Deputy Director, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. And has Lindsay Eichner popped in while we're doing? Not yet. But I see Austin has, and he was up higher. Austin?
Yep. Hello, Austin Barnes, Principal Land Use Planner, Marion County.
Great. Thanks, Austin. And Maitrier?
Teresa Knapp with Washington County and Senior Rural Planner. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Hudson?
Mark Hudson, the Land Program Director at Oregon Agricultural Trust.
Great, thank you. And how about Matthew? Did Matthew come in yet? Is that Matthew now? Who dat? Okay, Mike.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy. I represent Ag for Oregon. I'm also a McCarthy Family Farm, full-time farmer, first-generation farmer.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I see Lindsay Eichner has just popped in. We're just asking name and your affiliation, Lindsay.
Hi, my apologies for being late. Lindsay Eichner, I'm the Assistant Planning Director at Lane County Planning.
Super, thank you for being here. Peter Knighty.
Peter Knighty Family Farm, Inc., diversified farm with a small seasonal produce stand.
Super, thank you. Ryan Craybill.
Yeah, Ryan Craybill with the Oregon Farm Bureau, and here on behalf of our members, land use and farm stands is one of the items in my portfolio.
Great, super. Thanks for being here, Ryan. And Samantha.
Samantha Baird, General Counsel for the Oregon Property Owners Association.
Super, thank you. And Sid.
Sid Friedman, representing Friends of Yamhill County.
Great, thank you so much. All right, that's my list. But I see that someone just came in there. Pumpkin Patch. Pumpkin Patch, I think Pumpkin Patch is one of our members, right?
That's Matt
Matt is
Finelli.
Yeah, I'm here. Trying to get it all pulled together.
Okay, good. All right, so that's
sorry, I joined late. I have to leave my camera off because my power just went out as I was trying to meeting, and I'm on my hotspot, so I can't support my camera. But I'm here, Alice, Friends of Family Farmers. Sorry about that.
fantastic. Thank you, Alice. All right. Well, that's our rec. So that's fantastic. Wonderful. But for the one who let you know she couldn't be here. So that's great. Thank you all for being here. Let's find out who else is here. So let's go to Commissioner Boyer, sorry.
Good afternoon, Barbara Boyer, LCDC. And for those new on the phone call, I am the liaison and do not participate in this process. I'm here to listen and learn, and I will be off camera. I will not be sitting at the table. And I do need to leave at 3:30. So
Okay.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
So between 3:30 and 4:30, or no, between 3:30 and 4, people can say whatever they want that you don't want Barbara to hear. All right. Let's see. I see Anka with her camera on.
Hi, hello folks. My name is Anka Matika. I have the pleasure of working for Governor Kotek, and I am just here listening in, so I will also be off camera. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Good. Who else have we got that's not part of the RAC? I see Kirsten. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Kirsten Green. I serve as DLCD's Deputy Director and Tribal Liaison. Thank you, Donna. Just
Thank
here
you.
listening. I'll be off camera, but listening. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Casaria. If she's there. We know she's there.
Here, I'm just hidden behind lots of screens. Hi, Casaria Taylor. Good afternoon. I'm the Senior Rules Coordinator with DLCD.
Super. Thank you. And such a big help here. We appreciate that. How about Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. Alyssa Bonini. I'm a legislative and policy analyst with DLCD, and I'll also be keeping my camera off today.
Great. Thank you. Gordon?
I'm Gordon Howard, Community Services Division Manager with DLCD. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. And our final two, I think, is Chris Roebuck and Claire Zielinski.
Chris Roebuck from Thrive Hood River.
Great. Thank you. And Claire?
Claire Zielinski, fifth generation farmer in Salem, Oregon. We have a year-round farm market We are orchardists, so we grow apples, pears, peaches, and hazelnuts. And my father will also be using my Zoom for public comment just because when there's two phones in the same room, it gets crazy. But he is a third generation farmer and he is the one that started and opened our farm market here.
Super. Okay, great. Thank you, Claire. And anyone else from members of the public? And Claire, I know you would like to do public comment with your father. And does anyone else want to do public comment today? That sounds great.
This is Sid Friedman. I intend to
Yes.
public comment.
Yes, I know that you and Mike McCarthy, both we have you on tap to do that. And what I'd like to do is have public comment go first, and then the RAC members will go after. But the RAC members are doing public comment because they have some things they just want to present to the rest of the RAC. We're limiting that to 3 minutes, just to be really clear on the process that we're using here. And so we will do that, but we'll do it after public comment. So
Yeah, Donna, can I ask a question?
please.
So why are our comments not just part of the RAC process as a RAC member?
Yeah, I'm gonna let someone at DLCD respond to that. Is that Casaria? Is that Hillary? Howard?
This is Hillary Foote. I'm the Farm and Forest Specialist for DLCD. We've had some requests to share materials with the RAC during the meeting as opposed to through the public comment submission process. And we've decided that in order to maintain the integrity of the discussion among the RAC members on the topics, that we will shift the presentations into the public comment period. So those who would like to actually present materials will have that during public comment, so as to keep the flow of conversation going during the actual discussion on the topics.
Mm-hmm. And so those and the materials that they sent in that they're going to be sharing, that will be part of the public record. That will, so it does go, it is part, and you and Mike, it will be part of our summary as well. So
as I understand it, though, the public comment is not a part of the meeting summary.
it is mentioned in the meeting summary. If you look at the meeting summaries, we have been including the comments, or at least a summary of the comment from each member of the public for past.
Okay. And I sort of understand this, but it is rather peculiar to me that is specifically related to the topic of discussion. So I'm a little questioning why it's in a separate category, but I will go with it.
Okay. All right. We were just really trying to figure out where, because we just got the request to have these in the last couple of days. So we're trying to figure out where on the agenda did it make sense to make sure that we had the conversations that people were ready for, and then time for you all to do those presentations. And Sid was able to say, I can do it in 2.5 minutes. So it's like, let's put it into that public comment or right after public comment. So it'll be really clear, Mike, that it's clear on your names. You are RAC members. So it'll be really clear that it's from RAC members. So thank you for that. And let's see, I think that let's go to the next slide. Yeah, I just want to remind folks of the operating agreement, that we do have one for the group, that everyone agreed to be part of this in a particular way. And you've all done a fantastic job of doing that. I'll just take a couple that I want to remind everybody about consistently of, when you speak as though you're right, you know what you're talking about. Spend the rest of the time listening as though you might be wrong. Be curious during these conversations, and continue to treat each other with the utmost respect that you have been doing so far. It's been really a pleasure to be working with all of you. So I look forward to another good meeting today. And if anybody has any other questions process-wise, let me know before I kick this on over to Hillary for our first topic. Ready? Are you ready, Hillary?
Okay, yeah. And before we move into our discussion for this morning, I just wanted to take a brief moment again to review the timeline for key steps in the rulemaking process for the remaining months that we'll be working together. So as we recall, the charge for this rulemaking involves 5 topic areas that were identified by the 2025 Legislative Agritourism Work Group. So our first meeting in May, we discussed the primary use of a property hosting a farm stand and the primary focus of farm stand development. Our second meeting on June 3rd was devoted to a discussion of promotional events that are authorized in conjunction with a farm stand and where those can take place. And the key points from those discussions, those conversations, are documented in the meeting notes, the meeting summaries that are posted on the rulemaking website. If you haven't had an opportunity to review those, I'd encourage you to go ahead and do that. So today at our June 24th meeting, we're going to be discussing prepared foods and also discussing potential impacts to neighboring farms from farm stand. So more on that in just a moment. At our next meeting on July 18th, we will be discussing, that entire meeting is going to mostly be devoted to a discussion on a full draft rule proposal. So staff's thoughts on what we have heard on all 5 of these topics. At that July 18th meeting, we will also review the fiscal and housing impacts of those proposed rule changes. So our next meeting is going to be a big one, big discussion. Following the July RAC meeting, the agency will make any needed adjustments to the rule proposal based on that conversation from our July meeting and any additional comments we receive in writing. And then in August, that proposal will go through an internal agency review process. The Department of Justice will also review it. In September, I believe it's September 1st, the Secretary of State will issue a notice of proposed rulemaking that contains the agency's rule proposal, and that's sort of like the official notice for the rulemaking. And that will, of course, be forwarded to all of you when it comes out. And that is the rulemaking proposal that is going to be considered by LCDC, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, at their September hearing. So I just want to take a second, and it's important to note now that LCDC may make adjustments to the language that's contained in that notice. They may choose ultimately not to address topics that are in that notice. They may choose to modify, again, language that's in that notice, but they can't add new topics that are not in that notice. Okay, that's an important thing to know about that Secretary of State notice that goes out. Again, it would be really ideal if we all agree on the language proposals, but that doesn't necessarily need to happen. If there are comments or perspectives from this RAC that we don't integrate into our rule proposal, we're going to note that in our staff report to LCDC for the September rulemaking hearing. And at that hearing, LCDC will review and listen to all public testimony and consider those proposed rule changes. And you will also have an opportunity to provide your thoughts and comments directly to LCDC during that hearings process as a member of the public. Okay. Our RAC may also meet a 5th time following the LCDC September hearing if there's a need to, and that would be determined after the September commission hearing on the rulemaking. So that meeting would likely be held November 4th or 5th, that first week of November, again, after Halloween, after the close of the sort of fall harvest season. And public comment for this rulemaking is scheduled to close on Friday, November 7th at 5 o'clock. So that's also an important date to make note of. We are collecting public comment now. We have been since March, and we will continue to collect public comment all the way through that November 7th date. After November 7th, no additional public comment will be taken. Then the final adoption hearing for the rulemaking is scheduled for the December LCDC meeting, which is going to be December 4th or 5th. So any questions on the schedule? It looks like Samantha has her hand up.
Sorry, I was muted, and so is Samantha. Thank you.
Okay.
All
Sorry,
right. Yeah, she does. She's been waiting patiently. Thank you, Samantha, for waiting. Thank you, Hillary, for going over that. Samantha, please.
One question and one comment. Do you know, Hillary, what day we might see the draft proposed rule language?
So we are intending to get our packets out a week in advance of the July meeting. And I was going to talk about this at the close of this meeting, but you'll know that there are some draft sort of thoughts from the agency on proposed approaches to addressing the items we discussed in the first two meetings in the materials packet for this meeting. So I was going to touch on that at the close of the meeting, but that was intended to give you more time to think about those and respond to that in writing before the July meeting.
Okay, got it.
There's some out there now, more coming at least a week in advance of the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just a comment for the department to consider. In past processes, one of the things that has been difficult, I think kind of frustrating for RAC members and members of the public, has been if there are some pretty substantive changes that happen to the rules after public comment is closed. And then there's no additional opportunity for public comment. That can be challenging because then there's really no opportunity for anyone to raise any final concerns, even on the implementation or anything related to the rules before the commission votes. And so I know we've all talked about this before, but I just like to put it back out there for the department to consider that if there are substantive changes in November, that the department please consider doing an additional public comment opportunity.
Great.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for
we'll
that
note that.
comment. Yeah, that's really helpful. Good. Alice, I see your hand there. Your hand went away. Alice, did you want to say something? Not anymore. Or her power just took her down completely. So we'll see. Is she still on? Oh, there she
Maybe
is.
we can make a
she
note to circle back to Alice on process questions.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry. My power came back on and it kicked me out again, but now I'm back. I'm so sorry. What is the last deadline? Is it just simply 1 week after today's meeting that we could still submit written comments as RAC members to be considered in the full draft rules? Or what is a hard deadline that I can depend on of like when I need to send my thoughts in writing in total to
Yeah, thank you, Alice. So we will ask for any sort of written comments to be included in the July packet by July 3rd. And again, I'll get that, we'll touch on that later again today. And then we will take public comments for some period after our July 18th meeting. We haven't sort of agreed on a date for that quite yet. But we will certainly let you know. So there'll be, sometime after our July discussion for people to think about that, to review the meeting summary, provide comments on it, and any final thoughts on that discussion. And then, of course, you will have an opportunity to provide public comment through the LCDC process, right? So there will be, you can submit public comment anytime to the agency up until November 7th at 5 o'clock.
And remember that was extended, the date to November, to allow for people who may be doing farm stands during the fall, during the harvest, during both harvest and farm stand time. So, good. Okay. Any other process questions before we push into into the substance for today? Okay. Then with that, let's move on to our next one, reminding everyone of the charge that you've been brought together to consider potential changes to the Oregon administrative rules concerning farm stands. And I'm going to pass this to Hillary as the farm stand person for DLCD.
Yeah, so thank you. So now we're going to enter into discussion on prepared foods with a direct tie to farm operation of the local agricultural areas, how that came to us from the legislative work group. So in the packet for today's meeting, we included a summary memo from 2006 that describes the farm stand rule changes that were adopted in 2006. And in that particular rulemaking, LCDC expanded the definition of farm crops to include processed crops and livestock, and clarified what sort of items we thought could be sold at a farm stand that are not subject to any income limitation. So in that section of the rule, we added a clarification that processed crops and livestock includes things like jam, syrups, apple cider, animal products like jerky, and other sort of similar items that have been processed and converted into another product. And we also clarified in that rule language that that was not intended to include prepared food items. So the definition here explicitly excludes prepared food items from the definition of farm crops for the purposes of a farm stand. So any prepared foods like packaged sandwiches or burritos that are being sold at a farm stand are incidental retail items subject to the income limitation, that 25% cap on income. And the intent behind that was to keep the primary focus of the farm stand on the sale of farm products, right? And that it is not a permit pathway for something else that is more like a deli or a restaurant, but a place to sell farm crops. So what we are hoping for today is feedback on how we can make this language clearer, easier for counties to implement, easier for applicants to understand. And we'd ask you, how do you distinguish between processed farm products and livestock and prepared foods? And what language might be helpful here to clarify what we're talking about? So Donna, if it's okay with you, I think it might be useful to actually start by asking some of our county planners in their experience, how they explain, this distinction to potential applicants at the counter to sort of getting us off on that conversation.
Yeah, it seems as though in past meetings, that's been really helpful for people to hear how are planners doing this out in the real world. And not that this right here isn't the real world, but just what are planners doing and saying to folks, and then we'll hear from others. So again, I just want to make sure everybody, from my perspective as your facilitator, I just want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to say what you want to say. Nothing more, nothing less, being mindful of other people who want to say things. So with that, let's start with the county planners. What do you tell people about prepared foods? How do you approach this problem or issue so it's not a problem? Justin?
Hi, and I apologize for not having a camera. I really actually don't have a camera to turn, so I can not turn one on.
You can't turn it on.
Right. But anyway, well, what I have said is things that are actually growing on the land itself. I think there's a provision in our code that allows for some neighboring properties that are also farm fields to be brought into that equation. I can't recall at the moment, but that it has to be tied to that, and it can be reconstituted in a number of forms. The examples I've used personally are herbaceous crops turned into essential oil by distillation. When you start adding products like other oils that mix with that for a lotion, for example, those aren't produced on the farm. So then we get into a calculation formula on the 25% that is and how much that is in each product, which is kind of complicated. Another example would be a distillery, an on-farm distillery, where the actual grains, the rye that is grown there, and other carbohydrates are mashed on site and converted distilled into alcohol on site. That's where that limitation comes in as well. So it seems like where the tricky part is if people have also a large garden in association with their farm, and they want to do things like sandwiches and whatnot, accompaniments, I guess you call them, is how much of that lettuce and how much of that tomato and how much of the meat that you're on there, how much of that actually came from the farm. We haven't had a lot of cases to really to flesh that out, but that's kind of where I've started in my conversations.
Nice. Great. Super. Thank you for that, Justin. And let's hear from, excuse me, a couple of others. So, what's similar? What do you do differently? And I've got a nice lineup here. Maitreya, you're first, then Austin, then Eric.
Yeah, so we haven't had really too many questions from applicants asking us to differentiate between prepared or processed foods. But generally, I mean, with processed, the idea that we've explained to people is essentially just converting the farm to something outside of just drying or packaging or something that's really not as simple as that. So if you're canning or want to make cheese, or you're just converting the farm to something else and then wanting to sell, that's essentially processing. With prepared foods, I think it's more a matter of trying to make it more palatable for people, and that's kind of just like food consumption, whereas processing would include products that's not necessarily just for consumption. But then the question that comes with prepared foods is, and again, we haven't really had anybody specific ask about these, but there's obviously a kitchen factor that comes into it. So then where does the kitchen tie in? And it would be helpful to first have some distinction between process, some guidance or a definition included with the rule to distinguish between processed and prepared. Like the process, there's a few examples given in the definition of the farm stand. It would be helpful to have something like that associated with prepared foods as well, which can only be incidental. But the other thing is the kitchen comes into play, and then there's the question of where exactly does it fit in? Like, is a kitchen allowed in conjunction with a farm stand? Or do you use your home kitchen, in which case it's for a commercial use? Then is that like a home occupation, or does it have to count as a separate facility to be permitted? So that's a question that often comes to mind if when we're having these discussions. So that's kind of what I had to say.
Wonderful. Great. Very wonderful things to be considering here. Thank you for that. And especially that, it would help you and maybe others if it were clear what is processing and what is prepared. And then that question you just raised about where's the kitchen fit into all this? Good. Thank you. Austin, Eric, Charles.
Well, first, if I unmute my camera, I'll say something. I'd say we're relatively similar to that in Marion County. I do like that question of like what it'd be nice to have some more help on the difference between processed and prepared, because you could kind of say that's the same thing, right? But what a lot of times we help people with at the counter to give them guidance is we talk about, well, when you start adding value to an item, you're changing it, it's processed or prepared at that point. So like a really simple example, a farm stand I've done is a strawberry farm wants to sell strawberries and strawberry milkshakes. Well, those fresh strawberries are just the farm crop. That's fine, no restrictions. That strawberry milkshake is a processed or prepared item, so that falls into your 25%. And that can be expanded where I've had people call and talk about, well, what if we raise cattle, and then what if we actually like produce flour on the farm and other vegetables? Well, can then I sell tacos if I help make the tortillas and I produce some of the vegetables and I produce the meat? And it's like, well, yes, but that's the processed and prepared, so you still need 75% fresh. And that's, I think, where a lot of the tricky stuff comes into, where now people are, if I'm growing it all, but I'm altering it at some level, where does that fall in? But what we try to do is, like I said in the beginning, is when you start adding value, when it's not in its raw form, when it's not just dried, when it's not just fresh, that's when it's processed or prepared. And that's how we look at it when we start grouping in with that 25% incidental.
Got it. Great. Now you're making me hungry. I guess I should have expected that when we were going to be talking about foods and prepared foods. I should have thought about that. All right, Eric, what do you got? Then Charles, then Lindsay.
Yeah, so these are great questions. Things that in Hood River County we have to grapple with occasionally. And within our zoning code, we look at things. I mean, the way it's described in statute and rule, it talks about fresh and processed farm products. Those are treated as farm products. They can be sold. There's no restriction on the amount of product that you can sell as long as they're fresh or processed farm products that are grown on the subject property or within the local area, which is defined as we talked about before, all lands within Oregon or adjoining counties within Washington. And so essentially, if you have anything that's been processed and converted and into a different product, that's something that can be sold the same as a piece of fruit. And so if it's gone through a process of, say, canning or drying or baking or freezing or butchering, those are all things that are value added that go into that product. Our zoning ordinance clarifies that you may include some incidental items, in that processing. And so, for instance, with a jam, you may be using strawberries, but you're also using sugar and pectin to make that product. So there's some incidental items that are included in that processing. And so, and then when you start talking about prepared foods, the way that we look at this is if you are selling blueberries, that's fine. But if you put those blueberries on a bowl of ice cream and sell that's the prepared food item. The same could be said for like a bottle of wine. If you're selling just a bottle, that's fine. That's a prepared food item. Excuse me, that's a processed farm item. It can be sold the same as a piece of fruit, but if you pour that into a glass and serve it, then that's a prepared food item. And the challenges become like, well, I guess one of the things that's also important to note when we're talking about prepared food items are those things that are packaged, but sold in for on-site consumption. Those that are like if you have like a hand pie, if you're selling that, it's in a single package. It's a one serving portion. We treat those as if they are a prepared food item because they're intended to be consumed on site, the same as any other prepared food item. And that's written into our zoning code. And I think having that language in the rule would be helpful as well. That's all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Really helpful. Great. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for the examples, Charles, and then Lindsay, then Samantha.
Hi, thank you. I agree with a lot of what the planners are saying. This is a difficult subject and very interesting for us to learn more about. The farm crop processing as jams, apple ciders, stuff like that. If you're turning tomatoes into a tomato sauce, that's a farm crop processing. And when you take that tomato sauce and put it on a pizza, I think that's where you're looking at a next level and that becomes a prepared food of a pizza. So I think that's one consideration we could look at is, and I kind of hate to lean on other agencies, but the way ODA, Oregon Department of Agriculture, has processed, what they consider processed, like the apple ciders, jams, syrups like that, those are processed foods. And then the health department, the regulations regarding whether you have to have a commercial kitchen, I think that's a key component to what we're looking at. And we'd also have regulations for farm crop processing that also can play in, into this. So it's a complicated issue. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah, great. And thank you for taking us to another example that we can then start saying, are we getting this, right? The processed sauce to the pizza, gonna eat it on the site, even if it's takeaway pizza, right, Charles? Still prepared. Good, thank you. Lindsay and Samantha.
Just wanted to ask a process question. Sorry. And so as we talk about prepared food, so I would just say from a regulatory standpoint, there's different agencies that regulate that, but I feel like in this instance,
I want to go back to the core of the legislative intent and I understand that processed foods isn't allowed in the rules right now, but is that in the statute? And if so, I guess, what is the concern? I feel like we're spending a lot of time worrying and talking about, things that may not be produced on the farm, but they're still promoting agriculture. And I think that's something that's pretty clear is people want to buy foods to eat. So is it a foregone conclusion, I guess, that processed foods could not be allowed in farm stands?
Thank you, Lizzie. Let me take that. So the statutory authorization for farm stands focuses on the sale of farm crops and livestock that are grown on the operation or in the local agricultural area. So that's the primary focus of the farm stand. Farm stands can also sell retail incidental items, and they can also charge fees for promotional events, right? But this is a permit for a farm stand. In 2006, LCDC loosened up the standard, and we said that farm crops also include processed farm products. So that includes both fresh and processed farm crops and livestock grown on the farm operation or in the local agriculture area. And to clarify our intent, we gave some examples, like you can sell jam, you can sell syrup, apple cider, jerky, and it's not subject to any income limitation. Those are like processed farm products, right? Other things can still be sold at a farm stand, like those retail incidental items, but they're subject to an income limitation, that 25% cap. That's designed to ensure that the primary focus of a farm stand is the sale of these farm products and not on, it doesn't become a retail store for general merchandise, or it doesn't become, something else that stays a farm stand. If people want to pursue other different types of commercial businesses, there's different permitting pathways for that. So our rules, when we adopted this expanded sort of opportunity for farm stands, we clarified in response to comments received at that time that processed farm crops did not include prepared food items. That was essentially to make sure that a farm stand, which is a sub 1 permit, use allowed outright, didn't actually become something like a deli or a restaurant being permitted as a sub 1 use in a farm zone. So anything that's a prepared food item, again, like packaged sandwiches or packaged burritos that are sold at that farm stand, would fall under that retail incidental item category subject to an income limitation. So sale of like t-shirts and prepared sandwiches and event fees can only be 25% of the income of that farm stand. Is that a helpful clarification?
Yes. But just one more question on that. So I'm clear. Could a property owner that had a farm stand, could they apply for a restaurant permit in an exclusive farm use to go alongside their farm stand?
So a restaurant is not an authorized use in an exclusive farm use zone. So only uses that are authorized by the legislature, and there are about 60 of them, can be permitted in exclusive farm use zones.
And restaurants not one of them.
And restaurants are not one of them. There have been some bills in recent legislative sessions, around that idea, but they have not gone anywhere.
Okay, but so I guess my question is, when we say that it's not that we want to stop them from doing something that would be another type of permitted use, it's actually not an available type of permitted use. Is that correct?
So you can have farm to table dinners under an agritourism and other commercial event permit, for example. That is one option that's available. There are home occupations, which are smaller scale sort of uses that encompass a variety of different types of commercial activities. And then there are larger commercial activities in conjunction farm use permits, which, you know, a lot of things get permitted under those. And restaurant type facilities are also allowed at wineries, cideries, and breweries that are permitted under farm zone statutes.
So there are
thank you.
other ways for folks to do it, and this distinction is between when is it just allowed an outright use under the farm, and when do you need to get something else? And that is exactly the rub here, Lindsay. I mean, that's exactly what
Yeah.
rub
I mean,
is
it
probably the
seems like
wrong
we're trying to limit the available types, like how creative the farmers can be with their business. So I was just really trying to get to why it is necessary to do that, because I think, like, I see a lot of farmers that are promoting agriculture and doing kind of education around agriculture that would fall in this category. And as we're hearing from the planners, there's, you know, a pretty extensive, like, I think it's confusing, and just from the planners we heard so far, like, I think different counties are doing it different. And you know, so really drilling down to police that 25% seems like something that may not be able to be adequately and uniformly applied. Is
And if I can say, just as someone who doesn't know that stuff, but I'm just listening here, is that I'm not hearing the policing stuff as much as maybe some would like us to hear. But what I am hearing from planners is it would be very good to have this really clear, because they are giving advice to potential permittees of, you know, do you need a permit or don't you? And right now, what I'm hearing is there's some lack of clarity, and that's what I've heard from everybody from the start of this is, you know, let's find the places that we need more clarity and get clear. And I do see you waving your hand around there, Sam, and you're next in line.
Well,
Thanks, Lindsay.
I appreciate Lindsay's comments, because I have a somewhat different but same perspective. I'll say, so generally I represent applicants, and the folks that I represent are not confused about what a processed farm product is. That's not where the confusion generally lies. The confusion generally lies on if prepared foods, which most people think of as foods for on-site consumption, are allowed. And I have seen permits, even some from within the same county that were issued, you know, at significantly different times, where some permits flat say no prepared foods allowed whatsoever, and other permits allow it, but as an incidental item subject to the 25%.
25%. Okay.
And this, what Lindsay was just saying of like, well, why would we limit that? Why would we do that? I will say a lot of the people I represent don't want it to be significantly limited, because selling prepared foods is one of the best ways they have to connect with their customer base and show the quality and the value of the product that they make. For example, what sells milk products better than being able to give someone a milkshake or some cheese to try on site? Taste is an extremely persuasive tool when you're selling a food-based product.
Yeah.
And so that is why my organization brought the bill that we did this legislative session, to make clear that prepared foods should be allowed through a farm stand, because there really isn't any other way to allow that, as we already just talked about, with some limitations on it to make sure that the, you know, food that's being served is actually grown by the farm operation, and that we're not having, you know, standalone food services restaurants where they're selling prepackaged stuff made, you know, in a different state entirely. So that is really where I think, at least from the people I represent, the farmers and the applicants and the people and clients, there's not a lot of questions about processing. It's about whether or not they can sell prepared foods. And then just one last note on processing. There are numerous definitions of processing and administrative rules across various agencies. Department of Revenue and ODA are two of the most relevant examples. They have completely different definitions of processing, which make it very complicated. And so if this department does adopt its own definition of processing, I just think that that's going to make it even more complicated and should be done with a lot of care and consistency. Probably with ODA's definition would be best.
Okay. So some integration there on that definition. Great. All right. Thank you, Samantha. I'm going to keep rolling along. This one's really generating a lot of conversation, which in my conversation with staff beforehand, they said, yeah, we think this is going to be a much livelier conversation, both on prepared foods and then on the next one on the impacts to neighbors, which might even get emotional. So let's keep going. Alice, Sid, Mark, Mike, Austin, Jim, Peter, in that line, in that order. Alice, you're first.
Hi, thanks everybody. Donna, I'm going to send a couple links to you. If you could put them in the general chat, that would be really helpful.
Okay, thanks for reminding me that you can't do that.
Yeah, something that I want to keep top of mind in this discussion is that there is a law that has been on the books for a long time that was updated in 2023 that my organization and our farmers care a lot about, called the Farm Direct Producer Process Exemption. It's part of the Farm Direct Marketing Law, and it is the collection of guidance from ODA. I put the ODA and OSU extension resources on it so you can get a vision of what this law is all about. And I think that I want to advocate to some of the planners in the room or to the conversation as a whole that all of the products covered under the Farm Direct Agricultural Marketing Law, including the producer process exemption, should be considered farm products. There is a requirement in the producer process exemption that all primary ingredients, meaning all fresh produce used in any of these things, has to come from the farm that is doing the processing. And the consignment laws on these products are much stricter than general, consignment or retail. It has to be from another farm direct marketer, only one-to-one, not one-to-one-to-one. So like you can't daisy chain the consignment, and it has to be from either the same county or an adjacent county. Like this law is very focused on small direct to consumer producers. And I would be very disheartened to see any portion of any of these products, even though some of them do use sugar, some of them have and they're all approved recipes with low food safety risk. This is a law that was crafted to really help the folks who are doing farm direct marketing, and parsing those products out into like, part of this goes into incidentals and part of this sale goes into your agricultural product because it's a processed product, I don't think is helpful and is just very difficult. And this is feedback we've received a lot from our producers, that we don't want any of the farm direct marketing law things to change. So I think when we're talking about processed products, keeping these laws in mind, the Oregon's farm direct marketing law should be the basis for what we're talking about when we talk about farm product and what's considered farm product. In my mind, I feel like, why reinvent it if it's already here?
Nice.
I think that I have two questions that I want to pose to the group, or actually one question that I want to pose to the group. I understand the line that some of the planners are drawing about like when it's intended for on-site consumption, which I think makes sense that is when it becomes prepared versus processed. I've gotten the question, I held some roundtables with my farmers in preparation for this meeting, and I got the question over and over again that like, okay, I'm allowed to sell bread through the cottage food law, and I'm allowed to sell jam through the farm direct producer process exemption using my fruit. If someone walks outside the farm stand and opens that bread and opens that jam and makes himself a sandwich, is that all of a sudden a prepared food, even though I didn't sell it that way? So like, what does on-site consumption look like if that's where we're drawing the line for prepared food? That's my more comments later. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if it was prepared for on-site consumption is what I'm hearing people saying so far as the distinction between what I just heard you saying, which is it was processed to be sold as a processed item, piece of bread, some jam, and the other people prepared it. So that's part of what I'm hearing, and great question to be to make sure it's really clear in whatever DLC might do here. Sid, you're next. Sid, Mark, Mike, Austin, Jim, Peter, Graham, Inga.
Yep. So on Hillary's previous slide, I believe it said a tie-in, prepared foods with a tie-in, the direct tie to the farmer operation of the local agricultural area. This may be obvious, but by statute, the sale of prepared foods as an incidental item must also promote farm products sold at the farm stand. A tie to the local agricultural area that doesn't promote farm products sold at the farm stand by statute is not allowed. The other 2 points I want to quickly make is that, as Hillary pointed out, there are other avenues in law that do allow for sale of prepared foods in farm zones, including potentially at farm stands, but not as an outright permitted use. And then the last point I want to make is that something that Jim Johnson said, I believe, at the last meeting, and that is that there's an ocean of difference between an occasional farm to fork dinner or farm to table dinner that, say, occurs every every 3 or 4 months, and something that occurs 5 days a week or 7 days a week. And that's, I think, something we need to keep in mind.
Good.
And that's it.
All right, great. Thank you, Sid. Great comments. Mark?
I think my comment is specific to, my guiding light in the difference between prepared and processed. It's not, the significance isn't preparation or processing, it's value recapture for the producer, right? And so, if we're really trying to look at stabilizing revenue for the producers as a farm, then the best way to do that is to gain value recapture from subsidiary processors that they would otherwise not be able to get, because they're selling their product direct to a processing or wholesaler who then gets that value on their own. I think to the extent that we can encourage that, the guiding light between processing and prepared foods doesn't matter that much to oat specifically. And it's relevant in both cases. I mean, if you're talking about a prepared food that's usually going to be prepared on site, that kind of thing, they've been able to value recapture that entire chain. But in processed food, what you're often doing is you're sending it to a processor, but then skipping and recapturing the value on the direct to market aspect of it. So I think, to me, that's kind of, if we're really looking at doing things which are good for farming and trying to avoid things which are maybe a little bit more cynical, and to, in the legislative process, there was an example brought up of a strawberry farmer should be able to go to Safeway and buy strawberry shortcakes and sell them at their stand. Again, that should be a pretty limited activity, but identifying the farm product and how the direct farm product, and then how that is attached to value recapture, in my mind, should be kind of the guiding light for what is allowed and not allowed.
Great. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Good. Okay. Mike, you're next. Mike, Austin, Jim, Peter, Graham, Samantha.
On the prepared foods, most of the farmers that are in our group and the farmers I talked to today, they're not really for a significant amount of prepared foods on the farm stand. And I think we need to figure out a way to work a lot harder to figure out the 25%, how we determine that, because it's almost always being violated, certainly in our county. And it's very difficult to drill down and get the actual data from the people, but it's very obvious that most of their sales don't have anything to do with their prepared items, and they don't have much to do with processed or fresh. So that's a couple comments, but.
And so Mike, can I just ask a question there? Okay. What is it? Help us understand what it is that they don't like about that, right? Because I'm hearing other people saying, this is a good way to draw people in, tastes good, taste is everything. And then now hearing from a couple farmers that they're not for it. Why? Well, help us understand that And
Well,
maybe other
basically,
folks too, but
basically they're restaurants in the farm zone. I would say they probably produce 10, maybe 5 to 10% of what's sold. Most all the things they sell are prepared items. And we'll talk later about the impacts on farms.
yes,
But we're very concerned that the farm zone is no longer being used for farming, particularly in high tourist areas.
okay,
There's really very little from the farm that goes to the customers. And we have had a hard time figuring out what a pizza really has to do with the farm.
yeah,
And we have a lot of that going on here. So
okay,
that's our concern about that. But the one thing I want to say about all these uses, every time we step up the uses in the farm zone, we increase the price of farmland. And particularly in Hood River County, most all farms and orchards here now are priced at a rate that's for commercial uses like wineries and restaurants. And that's kind of how the realtors look at it, is potentially you could have a winery with a restaurant in it. So we're going to add another $1 million to the price of that farm. And that's happening here. And I hope Oregon Department of Agriculture thinks very carefully about that, because it means that very few people can buy a farm anymore. And it's really an elitist thing, and it's going to spread throughout the state of Oregon. So that's a big concern. The other thought I have is, I do wonder why historically in Oregon and across the country, farmers have always had to have a second job. And for some reason now we think that the farm should be self-supporting. And that's very difficult, even medium-sized farms. I worked 17 years on another, managed a farm because I couldn't make ends meet. So it's very common. We're not going to solve it. And we really need to be looking at something that is more equitable to all farms, that brings all farms into this and tries to create better marketing paths for all farm products. And all the farmers I know are struggling, whether it's cannery crops, grass seed, hazelnuts, pears, et cetera, they're all struggling. And we need to look at how to get the 99% and help the 99%, which we're not doing by the farm stand thing. It's a small portion of our farm income. I don't have anything wrong with it. The farmers I talk to all say that they're very much for farm stands. They're not really opposed to farm to table dinners, but they don't see how it should have almost no crops from the farm. So that's really the main thing that I wanted to mention. And I think we'll talk more about the real impacts, but the impacts are severe in some circumstances. And I wish that Oregon Department of Agriculture would take a hard look at the impacts on the rest of us and the loss of land that occurs through these because of the large septic drain fields, the large kitchens, the large parking lots, the new roads, et cetera, all taking ag land out of production.
yeah, good. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for all of that. And that linkage to the farm is critical, not critical of farms and farmers that are doing this, but making sure that there's a relationship between what's grown there and what's sold there. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you. So I was kind of intrigued by what Lindsay from ODA said earlier about, well, it kind of the thought of, well, inherently are prepared food items not allowed by this rule based on language. And so I went back and was looking through our code that we have adopted here in Marion County, and I was like, wait, have I been approving, farm stands doing prepared food items when I shouldn't be? And a lot of that came up because I'm a little bit tired right now. I just got back from a 6-day camping vacation in Idaho, so my brain is it's fully not working. And so I was like, have I been approving a bunch of permits I shouldn't be? So I came back and looked at our language and was looking at this OAR here, and then was looking at the question, how do we distinguish between processed and prepared? And so as I listened more, I'm like, yes, we can do prepared food items. We can do processed food items, of course, at a farm stand. But what Marion County adopted, I don't know, this seems to cover it for me about distinguishing, right? And I believe one of these was flashed up earlier. I think it's from ODA or somewhere. It's been out for a while. But, you know, as used in this section, processed food items means farming crops and livestock that have been converted into other products through canning, drying, baking, freezing, pressing, butchering, similar means of adding value, such as jam, syrup, apple cider, similar animal products, but not prepared food items. I think everyone's heard that. And then we go and define prepared food items, that food products that are prepared for immediate consumption, such as pies, shortcake, milkshakes, smoothies, and baked goods. So I feel there's already language out there that distinguishes between them pretty well. I think it seems that that maybe in the beginning of the farm stand rule, that needs to be better explained, and this is where my knowledge of the legislative intent and the OAR is not that great, I think. And I forget as if those two sections I read out are even covered in this OAR, or can Hillary or someone confirm this OAR I'm looking at right now? This is the full farm stand code from DLCD. Is that is
That's correct, Austin.
right.
This is not the full section. This is the top part of the section. There's also language that prohibits the sale of marijuana products.
Yeah.
And there's also the section that we recently added that requires the sort of minimum standard for income verification being at IRS. And yeah, that one.
So then I'm wondering if those two definitions I read out, if those were added, you know, is that very helpful for people? And that's something that's in our code here with Marion County. We've got stuff about, you know, lights and parking and different things like that that should go along with it. But so, I mean, it just seems like those definitions are sort of out there already and seem to cover a lot of this. And then I think the thing that's tough is, like everyone has alluded here to, is the creativeness of farmers and what they want to sell and things like that, right? Like I go back to if you grow most of everything for a taco, can you sell that? I don't really think so. I think that'd have to be your 25% incidental. But that's sort of just like a thought exercise I went through where I confused myself, and I believe I made myself make sense with this. But I'm wondering if those definitions could be very helpful to add into this.
Great. Good suggestion. Thank you, Austin. All right. And, you know, if people are, you know, thinking to yourself, yes, that would be helpful or not, go ahead and you can, you know, give us some signs as you're going. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'm not asking for votes. I'm just suggesting if it's something you like, go ahead and let people know as you would if you were in the room. Okay. Jim, Peter, Graham, Samantha, and then back to Lindsay. Thanks, Inga. Saw that.
Thanks. I've got a lot of different thoughts here now I've been writing down, so sorry if they're a little. Number one, Thousand Friends supports prepared foods not being considered farm crops or livestock. The more you stretch this, the more you're turning you're taking away from the primary use of the exclusive farm use zone, which is farm use, and making it into something else. And we need to be really careful there. I mean, how far do you go in a residential zone with somebody operating a home occupation they're maybe doing sewing, and now all of a sudden they're starting to sell fabrics and they're starting to sell notions and how far do you go before that becomes the primary use? Does somebody in a forest zone that there's milling timber, can they start to sell furniture on site because it's made of wood? And how does that start to impact what the primary use of the zone is? So we have to be really careful here about how far we go in terms of you know, what is considered to be the primary use and protecting that primary use. The thing that to remember about some of these things that are starting to get to the edges of restaurants and restaurants promoting the farm product on there and the like, when you've got to remember that farm stands are not reviewed against the farm impacts test. They're not reviewed against 215, 296, and we're going to talk about this more later. But a restaurant is going to have a lot different impacts on surrounding farming operations than somebody just operating a legitimate farm stand. And we need to remember that farm stands are not reviewed against the farm impacts test. And so anything we add here is going to have impacts on surrounding farming operations. That's not going to be considered. You know, when I was at ODA, I got a lot of calls from people wanting to, especially county planners, asking, what's the preparation of a food? What's the preparation of a farm product? What's the processing of a farm product? And, you know, what I've heard from the county planners today is pretty straightforward. What I've heard from counties from all around the state on that. Processing is added value. Preparation is not added value. It's cleaning, it's drying, it's packaging, to move that product on. And when you start to add in some of this restaurant type of stuff or whatever, that's neither processing nor preparation, and we need to remember that. In response to something that Alice Morrison said, I think we need to be careful here about trying to say, well, one agency defines it this way and another agency defines it another way, and we need to fall in line there. Agencies have different reasons for regulating. Regulating food processing for food safety purposes versus regulating food processing for land use related issues are two totally different areas. And so while it's great to have the same definition when you can, they have different purposes for what they're regulating. And so they may be differently. And I can show you counties that have different definitions for different uses that aren't regulated by state law because of their purposes and the like. So we need to be careful there just to say, well, one agency defines it this way, we should define it that way also.
Nice.
That may be great if we can do that, but it may be for different purposes also.
Great.
And then lastly, I just want to again remind everybody, what's the primary purpose of an exclusive farm use zone? And as you get away from that primary purpose, we need to be taking into account the cumulative impacts of those uses on surrounding farming practices. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for all those ideas. And for helping to be a prolific writer of your comments in the written component as well. Thank you for that. Peter, Graham, Samantha, Lindsay. I need to do a time check. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, Peter. Need to do a quick time check because if I did my math right, then we probably should have started the public comment 5 minutes ago, maybe. I do feel like this is a really important conversation for RAC members to be having and to be making the points they're making. And so I'm going to let it go on, especially since I think we've just got Claire and her dad making public comment, plus giving some time to see Sid and Mike's slides. So I just want to let you know, I am watching the clock. I haven't forgot about it. I'm just making some decisions here and want to be straight with you all about it. Okay. So Peter, Graham, Samantha, Lindsay, and then we will move to public comment, barring Hillary telling me no. Let's keep going. Peter.
So just kind of responding to some things Lindsay said about why wouldn't we do all this stuff? Well, the reason we don't want is because it is an EFU zone. It's exclusive farm use. It's not exclusive farm use in restaurants. And it really all has to do with the impacts on the integrity of our land base and the impacts on neighbors. And that's the important thing. And I think we also need to be careful. This RAC is for farm stands, and sometimes it seems we've kind of branched out into other stuff. And I think it's helpful if we really confine our conversations to what do we want farm stands to be, what should be easily allowed, and what needs a little bit more, or the difference between a sub 1 and a sub 2 use, essentially. So
Yeah. And I'd even narrow that a little bit more, Peter, because I think the legislature has told us about farm stands, right? The charge to this group is, what do these rules say? And are there ways, it's inherent, I believe, in the charge given, are there ways to make them clearer to get at the uses that the legislature already set out for exclusive farm use zones?
And in general, reading through what you sent out about what the history and what's been added and stuff, I mean, they're pretty good. I don't have a big issue with most of what's there.
Great.
And
all right. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. So Graham, Samantha, Lindsay, and then we'll go to public comment.
All right. I thought it'd be helpful to share a little bit about our commercial kitchen, just to help kind of see what we're doing. We built it about 15 years ago. It was originally licensed under Marion County when we built it, and they helped us with all the permits and planning and all that good stuff. And we actually built a separate building connected to our farm store, connected but separate. And then it was transferred over to ODA we are now inspected once a year by an ODA inspector. And then we pay all of our fees and permits to them. There's several. Currently, we make jams and jellies all exclusively with their own fruits. Of course, you know, there's sugar, pets, and that sort of stuff we buy in. We do milkshakes that are really good. That is the only item that is made exclusively to be eaten on site. Then we also do scones, pies, cookies, and breads. Now, all of those are sold packaged and so are meant to be taken home, but can be consumed on site. Most of them are consumed off site. So very little of what our kitchen is producing is being consumed on site. It can be, you know, it's not exclusive one or the other, but most of it is being taken away. And so that is something important to keep in mind, that just because your kitchen is making it doesn't mean it's all being consumed on the farm.
Great.
That's all I've got.
All right. Thank you for sharing that picture of what happens at your place. Really appreciate that. Samantha, and then Lindsay.
Couple things. I just want to flag. I've heard repeatedly kind of the sentiment of, well, we don't want restaurants, we don't want this. And I just want to make clear, I think a lot of people would be more than happy having restaurants outside of the UGB and on land zone for farm use. And that's not because anyone's interested in there not being farms anymore. It's because I think people are starting to really think differently about consuming food products. And they want to buy products and food products from the source and in their local area more and more often. And so it is a pretty popular idea, actually. We've had multiple bills over several sessions for the farm cafes. The Oregon Farm Bureau's own policy book supports the idea of farm cafes. And I myself would way rather, you know, growing up in rural Jackson County, have gone 5 minutes down the road to buy a steak and potato from my local, you know, rancher than driving 40 minutes into town and getting that same thing at Outback. So I just kind of disagree with this like foregone idea that people don't want food service in the same place where the food is grown. I think people would actually really like more of those opportunities. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be sideboards on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and what about for the farm stands? Because we're not talking about restaurants here, and I know you're countering what you've heard other people say. So
yeah, that was
mean for the
exactly
farm
my next point was that we're talking about food service in the context of a farm stand, and people are already selling prepared foods. Why we brought the bill that we did again was to make clear that prepared foods should be allowed, because we've seen the variability of permitting, where even in the same county, one farm stand is allowed to sell prepared foods and one farm stand is not allowed to sell prepared foods at all. And I think there is confusion from planners of reading the existing rule.
So you're looking for consistency.
Yes.
In word and deed is what you're looking for.
And then when we're talking about the impacts of that, I'm sure we're about to talk about that, but in the context of prepared foods, exactly, if someone is already going into a farm stand and is buying things retail, there's really not much of an impact between them doing that and then them eating something at the same time. Like they're already parked, they're already in a building, they're already on the farm. So I don't fully understand what the difference of impact would be if
And we'll hear about that in the next one, I'll bet. Yeah, in our next agenda item. Super. All right, thank you for that, Samantha. And Lindsay, you got something started here. Then take yourself off mute so we can hear what you're saying now that you've heard it all.
Oh, sorry. I thought I did
That's
that.
okay.
Excuse me. Sorry to start the make it more controversial. But I just wanted to I think it was Austin's point about the language that Marion County has adopted. Just here, I think it might be helpful if we could look at all of those definitions together. We've kind of said them like I think someone also mentioned the Farm Direct statute. Like all of those definitions are a little tiny bit different because they are regulating different things. But I would say I agree with everyone that having a really clear definition of what is processed, like under Farm Direct, I believe, baked goods are low food safety risk, right? So generally baked goods are allowed, but I've heard in these conversations, sometimes baked goods are considered a prepared food because they might take that muffin and eat it on site, right? A lot of times in the food safety world or in the restaurant world, I would say like we talk about hot foods because that's a different impact. Like you have to have a different type of setup, right, to keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold, right? Whereas a lot of the Farm Direct exemptions are around foods that are shelf stable or they're canned or something, so that like you don't have to keep them hot the whole time, right? So, and Graham, you're nodding, like in your commercial kitchen, those are the things that you have to like watch out for, right? So I think it would be really helpful to look at all of those side by side, because I agree with Alice, like, there, I think that there's a really strong group of people that have worked really hard for the Farm Direct rules. But those are a little bit different from what I think I heard Marion County having, and they're a little bit different from, all of these different ones. So I think it would help us all to look at all of them and then maybe decide where are the differences, and does LCDC want to put that whole explanation in rule, or how can we make it more clear? Because some people are really clear in it, but I think a lot of others aren't.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So some sort of a side-by-side look at that this group could look at together, or a subgroup that might have more, I hate to use this term, stomach for that conversation. I don't hate to use it at all, actually. All right, Alice, I see your hand. I was going to move and feel like I really do need to move to public comment. Do you have a quick comment on this? You want to wrap this up before I go to public comment?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that I fully understand that the Farm Direct law is a food safety regulation, but folks are depending on that to build their business about what they're choosing to sell directly to consumer, and farm stands are a direct to consumer outlet. So I think that those things should be allowed to be sold as part of your agricultural product mix at farm stands, is the point I was trying to make. Thanks.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Alice. And thanks for doing it quickly. So with that, let's see. Yeah, I'll run a timer. Let me get it here. I think I did that last time. Let me get my timer ready. Urge you just to do a quick little stretch, because we're going to shift out of that conversation into some public comment here. So just do a quick little stretch while I can get my timer here. I got 3 minutes. And okay. And Claire, I know, I know your dad is there with you. Is he going to do a separate comment? Is that what you all were thinking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, great. So must be submitted in writing for it to be part of the rulemaking, for it to be part of the record. Yeah. And those of you who have already submitted us pictures and things like that, it's in the record. It'll be part of the record from this meeting. So, all right. Are you ready, Claire? You're first.
All right.
And
Thank you.
go.
So I submitted some written comment it was from the previous meeting, more about the definition of local. And I just wanted to quickly mention that I am concerned about if the definition of local changes from what it currently is, what confusion that might make with the Farm Direct Dollars program and the Double Bucks EBT program. I do not believe that those definitions will, if the DLCD changes the farm stand definition of local, that it will affect those programs directly. It won't change their language for local, from what I understand, but it will extremely impact consumers and the farm stands who are trying to help people who are in need to gain access to local food. Because if one government body is telling you this is local and another government body is telling you this is not local, and then you're trying to figure out how to not be out of compliance while selling that product to the people who are in need, then that creates a lot of confusion. So I think consistency and keeping the current definition would be great. Earlier, I know that Mike McCarthy mentioned that he has been seeing the potential that agritourism is increasing the value of land, and I have honestly been seeing the exact opposite. I see that agritourism is not, it's agritourism is really hard for another company to come in and take over that land. So the idea that it is adding to the value of the land is pretty minimal because there are only so many things that could go in to replace whatever business was there. And then also what I'm seeing is that agritourism is an opportunity for farm direct sales is an opportunity for small and medium farms to survive and potentially thrive, whereas large farms are what I see instead eating up land. Large farms that are, I personally just bid on 50 acres and I lost to someone who ate up the entire 500 acre parcel. And so what I see is that agritourism is helping keep small, medium-sized farms alive. And that if we continue to limit agritourism, then it is going to suffocate those small family farms and instead lead to giant commercial farming in Oregon. Do I still have time or am I done?
You got 20 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, and for the conversation of neighbors, I just think that chronic complainers are something that we really have to be careful of. I don't know what DLCD plans to do or change with the idea of bringing the conversation of neighbors to the table, but chronic complainers is something that the ODA has really had to set up barriers around for protecting themselves. And that oftentimes it is sometimes even the neighbors who are chronic complaining and never go to the farm themselves to say, hey, I have a small issue. Can we talk about it?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for that. And now let's pass to the next Zelinsky.
Hello, my name is John Zelinsky. I am with Easy Orchards, just northeast of Salem. I have been involved with farm direct marketing agritourism for 33 years. And through those years, there's been several different things that have come along, like this, what this RAC is dealing with. I think it was about 28 years ago when our apple cider was not being considered a local product. And I worked with Jim when he worked at the Department of Agriculture before when he was supposedly in a neutral position, but now has taken a position with that, one of the groups that is supporting ag or supporting extreme land use planning. So at that point, it was determined that local was anything grown in Oregon or a county surrounding Oregon if you were in a county that was on the edge of Oregon. I personally don't see any reason to get away from that. So that's my 2 cents on that. And we talk a lot about primary use, and I know there's official definitions, and the primary use of ag land is for farmers to survive and for farmers to thrive and be able to carry it to the next generation. Some people do this by engaging in agritourism and farm direct marketing. So it is a primary use of agriculture. Maybe not by an official definition from the state, but if you look at it from its true grassroots, that's what it is. I am not in disagreement that there shouldn't be businesses such as restaurants or that there shouldn't be sideboards on agritourism rules. I totally agree. We don't want Disneyland and 7-Eleven in the middle of, or a Applebee's in the middle of farm ground. But we also need to allow the farmers to be able to survive. When it comes to surrounding ag and impact on your neighbors, I have a nursery just down the road from me. Good people, they're cousins of mine. The amount of traffic that they cause, they've got 35 employees. They got trucks coming in and out of there all the time. They cross a major road to go to different parts of their nursery. That can be a major impact to someone who maybe is a grass seed farmer. And a grass seed farmer might say,
Can you hear that?
"Well, yeah, is that my time?"
That's your timer. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, just to wrap that up, impacts are not always just agritourism. It can be a different type of farming. If you're farming grass seed and you got grapes next to you, or if you're farming something else, wheat, and you have a nursery next to you, those things can impact what you're doing. It's more about getting along as a community. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, so I want to do a quick check-in. I think that's it for the public commenting today. Is that correct? I take that as a yes. I don't see any hands popping up or cameras opening. So I've got Sid and I've got Mike. I'm also conscious of the fact that it is now almost 35 and a stretch is in here somewhere. Do you want to do a stretch and come back and get those two? How do you want to move forward here? I want to just see what's going to keep people focused enough. Can you stay here for 6 more minutes?
Yeah, do the stretch after.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. That seems like a solid yes. All right. So Sid, you're first, and let me get my timer ready. Are you ready, Sid?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, let's go.
Oregon law allows the sale of retail incidental items and fee-based activity at farm stands, but only to promote the sale of farm crops or livestock sold at the farm stand. So let's take a look at what's actually occurring at some Oregon farm stands. Next slide. Here's a Clackamas County farm stand. The homepage takes you to their lunch deli menu right on top, with online ordering available 5 days a week. Next slide. Here's their menu. You don't see any farm products on that menu. And if you look up there, you can see that you can pick up the order to go, so you don't even have to spend time on the farm if you don't want to. Next slide, please. You can also rent the grounds for a bridal shower or other event. No tie-in to any farm products. Next slide, please. And they're selling apple snacks from a New York company and harvest snaps from a Japanese company. Selling apple snacks from a New York company actually undermines Oregon fruit growers. Next slide, please. And how about the local farm products that they sell? Maybe some point in the future, maybe they'll get around to it. Next slide, please. Here's a Yamhill County farm stand. They're selling frozen seafood. All their seafood comes from a Seattle distributor. Next slide. It includes frozen shrimp from Mexico. Next slide. Scallops from Maine. Next slide. Salmon from Alaska. And when people are spending their protein dollars on imported fish or imported seafood, that's money that is not in their budget for Oregon farm products. Next slide, please. Here's a Marion County farm stand selling pasta from Italy. Next slide. Soft drinks from Great Britain. Next slide. Spices from a Virginia company. Next slide. And all manner of kitchenware and trinkets that have no tie to the farm products that they're selling at the farm stand. None of these promote the farm products that are being sold at these various farm stands.
And just a quick question for you, Sid, and I know you're in the midst of this. I know you just have 1 or 2 more. Do you Do you know that the pictures that you're showing are from farm stands that are not permitted for anything other than a farm stand?
Yes, yes. To the best of my knowledge, I am sure of the Clackamas County one and the Yamhill County one. Although the Yamhill County one also has a B&B permit.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about, I believe that's also the case with Easy Orchards, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
But they do not have any authorization, I am sure, to sell products that do not promote the farm products that they're selling at their farm stand.
Okay.
Just to wrap up.
Yep. My bad.
This highlights the need to have clarity in the rules that the incidental items and the promotional events at farm stands must have a direct nexus to the farm products that are actually sold at those farm stands. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sid. Sorry for cutting into your time there. I was getting a couple of different comments of, what do we know about these things? So thought I'd just ask it while you were giving your comment. So Mike, you are up next.
Thank you. I do have some slides, I hope.
Are we seeing that?
I see public comment is what I see.
Oh, okay. Shoot.
Thank you, Casaria.
Are you there, Casaria?
I'm going to stop sharing for a second and I'm going to switch my share.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Hillary. Yeah.
There we go. Now we should be seeing a car. Yeah.
All right, 3 minutes starts now.
Yep. So I appreciate our planners in Hood River County who try to deal with this from day to day. One thing I want to make clear is I don't want to be a policeman. I don't want to be an enforcer. I don't want to have to file complaints. I don't want to do that as a farmer of a neighboring farmer. In this case here, you see cars illegally parked on the shoulders for a farm stand. First thing I want to say about this farm stand is it's very unique in farm stands in Hood River County. They actually grow probably 90% of what they sell. And so I commend them for that. I also, though, want to show you some other things. So next slide, please. So this is a picture of one of our semis, which we have to go by here 20 times a day, 10 times full, 10 times empty. And here's the road we go by, the farm stand. And what I'm concerned about is safety. We don't want to kill anybody. And it's extremely hard to maneuver through these situations. Next slide, please. So here's our truck coming out onto the highway. It weighs 190,000 pounds, takes a little while to stop, and cost a lot of money to have that guy there doing it. In many situations, I had another slide that showed this better. We had cars parked in the way and we couldn't get in and out of our orchard. I had to get off my forklift and go out every time to figure out a way to get the parked cars out of the way so we could get our trucks in and out of the orchard. Next slide, please. So here's our haul road. See that truck back there coming this way all day long. This is what this road looks like. That's our haul road. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous, and we're very concerned about what's going to happen long term. Next slide. And that's another picture. That's just an example. That's our haul road going through that pedestrians in the middle of the road all day long, every day. We have to go through there 20 trips a day. We also have probably 50 farm workers that have to drive through there every day, morning and night. It's a real challenge. It's a safety hazard. We need heavy regulation by Oregon Department of Agriculture to help us fix this. Somebody's going to get killed. The one thing I'd also mention is there's a lot of leakage from the farm stands, and this is not only this one, but all over the county, where people park in your orchard, they eat lunch in your orchard, coming from these farm stands. They decide they're going to walk in the orchard. We have an orchard, 2 orchards right next to this. They walk their dogs in their orchard. The dogs poop in the orchard. Violations of all our food safety regulations, particularly during harvest time. We have workers that are on that. Just one second. We have workers that are step in the dog poop from these people and then climb up their ladders, get dog poop all over their picking sack, all over the fruit, all over their hands, all from these people drifting off from farm stands. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And like I said, the pictures that you just saw will be in the folder, right, Hillary?
Yes, they'll be added to the record.
Okay. All right. So that is it for our public comment. That's our little bit more than 6 minutes, but close. So let's take a break. So let's plan to be back at 2:53 by my clock. The clock on my computer anyway. So 10 minutes for a break. We'll come back and we're going to talk about the next one. Comments about what we just saw and heard, and then the next one. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, it's 2:53. If I could ask people to come on back to the meeting. I am just getting my last bites in here. Okay, great. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you all for turning those cameras on, letting me know you're there. Okay. So we just want to allow 10 minutes to reflect on what you heard during the public comment. If anybody has any comments or questions from the public comment period, now is your time to ask that question or make a comment. Samantha.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Sid's pictures and comments and say a couple things. One, I'm just continually disturbed by the fact that your organization continues to put up photos of people's businesses to shame them for doing things. This is not the first time this has happened. This happened during the legislative session, and you showed many of those same photos targeting those exact same businesses. And I think it's really disingenuous, especially showing the ones about Source, because Source's farm stand was permitted as a conditional use permit as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use, not as a farm stand. And that went to LUBA and it got AWOP'd. So to come here and argue that they're out of compliance or making them seem like they're doing something wrong is completely not okay. It's okay if you didn't like that specific project, but I think it's really misleading for this RAC when we're trying to do this work about the farm stand permit. So I really take issue with that, and I really take issue with the fact that that was allowed to happen. If I knew that we were going to get to show pictures, I would have brought you a whole host of pictures and videos of all of my clients who are completely in compliance. And so I just think this exercise was really unfair, and I take issue with some of the images and things and the inference about these businesses doing things that are illegal or inappropriate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. And as a facilitator, I will take part of the responsibility. It was a quick turnaround on the decision around this, and we weren't exactly sure how to respond. And I think that your response, Samantha, is really helpful to us for thinking about the future of doing things like this. Ryan, I see your hand, and Sid, I saw your thumbs up as she was talking, and maybe that was you were trying to raise your hand. Got it. Okay. All right. Now I see. All right. Never mind. Okay. Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. I just as a preface, I've been on staff now at Farm Bureau for about 9 months, and land use is certainly the stickiest wicket that is in my portfolio. So I would
I'll
ask
bet
for
that's right.
a fair bit of grace, as I talk. I know that there's might be some that are eager to try to find Farm Bureau say something that they can jump all over. And so I would just, first, I would like to say that I really appreciated Mark's comment about recapturing value, and I think that is kind of gets to the base of what we're talking about here. I would also like to say that agriculture is not a one-size-fits-all thing. And I would be very discouraged if that's what we're trying to achieve through this process. And so, not all counties are created equal, thank God. And so, we won't have it does come down to some level of equity too. I've heard that concept discussed. So, places in Harney County that don't have the same level of economic development, they rely on things in a little bit different way than, say, Multnomah. And so I think we need to be mindful of that, certainly as it pertains to the access to prepared foods, and things like that. So I would hope that, as we continue this conversation, we remember that talking to our neighbors is important, and spending as much time on that as it is building a case to then put in a public forum. I think that's a worthwhile enterprise to work on the former instead of the latter.
Okay. All right, I've got Sid and Mike there. I see whoever else had their hand up has come down. And what I'd like to ask both of you, since you did just have time to make that public comment, I mean, now you're wearing your RAC hat, right? So as a member of the committee, this is part of what we were teasing around with, was like, well, how does this even work? But we did want to try and give some space for some comments. So Sid, as a RAC member,
Right. And I don't want to devolve into a back and forth with Samantha.
I think that's perfect. I think,
But I do want to set the record straight.
Okay.
And that is that I have never shown those slides before. Nobody from Friends of Yamhill County has ever shown those slides before. They've never been shown to the legislature. Source Farms in Yamhill County has a farm stand permit and a B&B permit. We did not challenge the farm stand permit. They applied for a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use permit, which was remanded by LUBA. The Court of Appeals upheld LUBA's decision. The Supreme Court denied review, and the county has not heard the remand. They have not yet held a remand hearing on the LUBA remand on the CAC food, on the commercial activity. So that I believe is where the facts are.
All right. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, I want to encourage people, part of what we're trying to do here is make space for people to share their different perspectives. And we know I wouldn't be here, right? DLCD wouldn't have said, hey, Donna, might you be interested in helping us with this? If we didn't know that this was controversial, and if we didn't know that this might trigger some pretty strong emotions for everybody. So, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for not engaging in the back and forth. And we might want to look on the back end on this. I'll talk with staff about some things on this, but I just want to say that. So I appreciate you, Sid, just setting that record straight on the one hand, and Sam trying to do the same thing. And we'll work on where we go next on this. So Mike, you're next. And then we move into the perhaps more emotionally bound component of the impacts to neighbors. And we're going to try and take a different approach to that question that might help you all think about it in a way that will be useful. So with that, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's totally appropriate in a rulemaking process to show how the rules are being implemented or not implemented on the ground. And that's why I showed those slides. And I make no excuses. And I don't think if Samantha's comments were really appropriate about them. DLCD has to know what's happening on the ground. They don't know. They're not here. Many of my farmers complain every day that we're going to lose the fruit industry in Hood River County because of agritourism. And it's a big concern, and it's affecting our bottom line every day. And we want to continue to produce pears to feed the United States 9 months of the year. We produce 30% of the pears grown in the United States in Hood River County, and we're very much threatened by agritourism.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Mike. And I'm sorry that you feel threatened by that, right? I do want to just express that there's an emotional component to all of these conversations for people for really good reasons. And so thank you for saying that, Mike, for using that word even. Because I think that does sit with everybody a little bit differently when we think about, all right, this is real people and real impacts on people. So, and I also heard in your presentation, Mike, that you don't want to be a policeman. You do want to be a good neighbor, and you do want to be supportive of farm stands. So that's where we're moving now, is into the impacts component of this, the impacts on others. And so I think when we were talking about it, we were thinking, well, how about we ask this question of, so what are some examples that people might think about that could protect and support neighbors? If you were putting a farm stand in, or if you were a neighbor, what would you want to have as that support and protection for the neighbors? You know, what would you hope from neighboring farmers that might be happening, might be going on? And what might be some strategies for implementing things around reducing those impacts so that they're supportive? You know, let's look at it from the supportive end rather than the harm end. Just might change our, let's bring our brains to it that way. Okay. What have you got there, Hillary? I see you've put something up and it may or may not be exactly what I was just saying. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder, we've talked about this a couple of times already, but it might also, be helpful to provide a little bit of context. A couple of people have brought up sub 1 and sub 2 uses earlier today already. And, it might be helpful to explain, again, what that means, because those are terms of art used in the rural planning world in Oregon. You won't hear that anywhere else. So just for a little bit of background context on impacts to neighboring farms, exclusive farming zoning is applied to agricultural land in Oregon. That's intended to be protected for farm use. That's the purpose of the zoning. So in addition to farming, there are over 60 different non-farm uses that are permissible. Those uses are established by the legislature and listed in Chapter 215 of statute. And those uses, those 60 uses are divided into two categories or two buckets: sub 1 uses and sub 2 uses that are listed in 215, 283 sub 1 or 215, 283 sub 2. Right, so the first category uses, the sub 1 uses, are uses that are allowed essentially of right. They're uses that the legislature assumed to be compatible with farm and forest operations in the surrounding area, so long as standards and statutes are followed. Counties have to offer these uses in their ordinances, and counties may not apply conditions that are more restrictive than what's in statute or rule. So farm stands are in that first category of sub 1 uses. Then there are sub 2 uses. These are generally considered or processed as conditional uses based on conditions. And those are uses that the legislature thinks may or may not be compatible with farming in the area, which is the purpose of the zone, depending on the specific property and the specific proposal, the circumstances of the request. So a county has to conduct a review for sub 2 uses, and based on evidence that's provided by the applicant and other community members, that county has to find that the use as proposed is essentially compatible with farm and forest operations in the surrounding area. So that's what's called the farm impacts test. It's essentially a good neighbor test. And in order to satisfy that test, a county may also require that an applicant implement measures to minimize the potential for negative impacts to farms in the area. So it's pretty common for counties to require things like vegetative buffers or setbacks for development or limitations on hours of operation to minimize potentially negative impacts for neighbors for these sub 2 uses. Counties can choose to offer sub 2 uses or not, and they can choose to be more restrictive than state statute. And most counties do apply additional criteria to sub 2 uses. So again, because farm stands are what planners refer to as sub 1 use or an outright use, there's this assumption that a farm stand permitted under the standards and statute and rule is inherently compatible with farm and timber operations that might be occurring in the surrounding agricultural area. So an applicant for a farm stand doesn't have to demonstrate that they're not going to have a negative impact on their neighbors as part of a permit review process. And that's really sort of what we're talking about here. All right, and as Donna had suggested earlier, we thought it would be helpful to focus on sort of these sort of aspects, like what standards, are in place right now that serve to ensure farm stands are compatible with farming in the area. And in earlier conversations, we already started to hear some creative ideas for mitigating conditions or requirements that might be applied to a farm stand to ensure compatibility. So that's just what I wanted to add, Donna, there.
Good. What's compatible? What conditions might be considered to ensure compatibility? So really try to take it from that positive angle of how can we support these things, and what does that look like, that compatibility? So thoughts about that? I know we'd heard the conversation last time, I think, about the working with the neighbors on what does it look like when you have a tulip festival, and how do you work on the line to get people into the festival or a farm, the sale, whatever that was. Sorry, but it was the tulips that really stood out to me, and the long line of cars. So Jim, I see your hand. What do you got for us?
Well, yeah. So, current standards now, it says what standards serve to ensure farm stands are compatible with farming in the area. Really, because it's a sub one use and it's not none of the additional standards are applicable, there's really not a lot other than the definitions that we already have in there to ensure that a farm stand is really associated with on-site farm use as opposed to becoming something else. That's really that's really the only standards we have right now to ensure that a farm stand is not impacting surrounding farming operations, is to ensure that it is a farm stand and is not something else that would otherwise be subject to review by the farm impacts test. I'm just betting, and also I'll bring it up now. Somebody's going to argue that right to farm does that. Right to farm is about nuisance and trespass. It is not about land use compatibility. And so right to farm is really not going to do anything to protect adjacent farms and the like from something like this. And if we want to get into that discussion later, we can do that. I would consider, I've given lots of presentations over the years on what right to farm is and isn't, and I just don't think we really need to go there, is what I'm saying, because right to farm is really about nuisance and trespass and lawsuits. It's not about the ability to conduct farming practices and like unhindered by non-farm uses and other things like that. So bottom line, because it's a sub one use, there currently are not a lot of protections in place. The counties can put some standards related to health, safety, and welfare in terms of that types of things, but those are not necessarily that much related to protecting farming practices.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I want to see if there are, from the planners, if you've thought about this or can think about this as well. I see Sid's hand there, but I do want to invite planners in as well to talk about, what do you feel has been helpful for this one? Sid?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Jim said, a lot of the uses that some are advocating to be allowed at farm stands are already authorized under other provisions of law that do consider they're authorized as sub 2 uses because of the impacts that they can potentially have on neighboring farm operations. And these, there's the agritourism statute, the commercial activities in conjunction statute, the home occupation statute, and the legislature rightly realized that these more impactful uses can be detrimental to neighboring farm operations and therefore need to be reviewed under the sub 2 use standards and not be outright permitted uses without further review. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Hillary, is this what you're looking for, this conversation?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. We heard again some examples earlier from some creative agreements that were made at other farm stands. If folks would like to share that again and remind us of some of those creative arrangements or conditions applied to farm stands, I think that would be helpful. If planners have examples of maybe some folks that they've worked with that have implemented conditions. That would also be really interesting.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Just want to make sure we're meeting the needs here. So Justin, Austin, Maitre, Eric, Lindsay, Mike. Justin, go ahead. But you have to take yourself off mute.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Last week, I received an application for a farm stand, 1,920 square foot building, which whenever I think of a stand, I think of a lemonade stand. I think of something even without a roof, but be that as it may, I accept that a building can be a farm stand. And the farm stand aspect will be reviewed under a commercial site plan review, which is what our standard is for any kind of commercial activity. That will address things like off-street parking, surface of roads, all public works related matters and other things. Agencies will weigh in, the fire districts as well. But when it comes to using that building as a venue, that's going to be a subsequent application for home occupation permit or something similar, which will also is a part of one of the sub 2 uses mentioned earlier, which will require notice to neighbors and also a stronger review. So that's one example that is on my desk right now.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about that. It's like, oh, great. That's great, Justin. Thank you very much. Austin, I said, go ahead. Sorry, Justin.
Oh, that's okay.
So what I'll read some examples out of our code again, some things that we added in, and I'm likely guessing some other counties have something similar added to their code in regards to farm stands and mitigating conditions, and they're compatible in the area. So we've kind of got like 5 that are mostly related to this. One is that we have adequate off-street parking shall be provided and all vehicle maneuvering will be conducted on site. No vehicle backing or maneuvering shall occur within adjacent roads, streets, or highways. And this is all stuff that we make conditions of approval. Of course, as you guys know, people can break conditions of approval all the time, but these are things we try to give upfront in the farm stand process. And next, we have no farm stand building or parking is permitted within the right of way. We have roadways, driveway aprons, driveways, and parking surfaces shall be surfaces that prevent dust and may include paving, gravel, cinder blocks, or bark or wood chips. We also say that approval is required from the County Public Works Department regarding adequate egress and access, including compliance with vision clearance standards. All egress and access points shall be clearly marked. And then finally, we talk about the outdoor lighting fixtures, that they shall be directed downward and have full cutoff and full shielding to preserve views of the night sky and to minimize excess light spillover onto adjacent properties, roads, and highways. So of course, those are just words that we write on a piece of paper and we say, hey, follow these as conditions. Which a lot of that is what a lot of planning is, right? And people can go break those. But we try to give that as guidelines and we have them as conditions up front so that I think people know like what is our expectation of a farm stand and how isn't it going to have that, car spill off onto the shoulders and things like that. And we at least in my 5.5 years here, we don't get a lot of calls about complaints about farm stands going over these or having issues. That just really doesn't seem to be a thing here. And part of that is because a lot of our really large farm stands, like Easy Orchards, just up the road from where I work, they have a really well-built parking lot with good access points, with good sight lines. Same with Bauman Farms, things like that, so that the infrastructure is kind of there to help mitigate those issues and there's proper buffers in between other properties.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Austin. Helpful. Maitre.
Yeah, so it's kind of tricky to answer that question since we see farm stand applications for those that are really small and simple just for daily sales, and they don't typically trigger too many concerns among neighbors. But there are applications that want to host promotional events, and it's a type 2 process with us, so we send out public notice, and primary concerns we see from neighboring properties are often related to noise, traffic congestion, or glare. And then street side parking and trespassing is something several farmers raise. So, I mean, in the absence of an impact analysis, where we can kind of require them to address these issues, we usually ask the applicant to provide some findings on these topics when they are addressing the farm stand standards itself. So for conditions, we often require screening the use areas, especially outdoors, or maybe limiting music to ambient indoor music, demonstrating adequate parking, of course, like Austin said, and then applicants often propose staggering customers through the day. So those kind of help mitigate some of the things. But I have to admit, for some of the larger ones, I often find myself wishing that I could require an impact analysis from them. Thank you.
Right. And when you say larger, what do you mean by larger?
Um, gosh. Uh, that may be a good thing to have some parameters defined for us, because another thought I had was for really small, simple ones that don't expect too many customers in a day. Pretty much really just a small farm store sorts, a type one, sorry, a farm stand without an impact analysis works, but some that are expecting to host a lot of promotional events, maybe few hundred people. I really don't have a number I can throw out here,
Yeah,
but a
think
few
about it.
hundred people or several events through the months, maybe those could be processed or have certain conditions, some criteria associated that they need to address when they're submitting an application. Maybe the ones that are actually proposing promotional events, perhaps those should address certain criteria separate from the ones that are not. So,
okay,
yeah, that's
good.
kind of my thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot like
No,
that.
that's
Plenty of
fine.
time. You can put them in writing. Don't worry about that. Sorry, I'm not going to put anyone else on the spot like that. All right. I'll try not to. I'm just curious, right? I'm like, what else are you thinking about these sorts of things? So my apologies. Eric, please.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Yeah, so yeah, in Hood River County, we're very familiar that farm stands are not subject to the farm impact test. You know, we certainly don't use those to approve or deny, but we do have regulations that do also, just like Marion County, address parking and outside lighting and other factors. It seems like there is also some benefit in allowing counties the option to add other types of things like adding buffers that farm stand facilities have to be located a certain distance from property lines, including parking areas and areas used for promotional activities. You know, with large farm stands, bringing a large number of people into a farming area certainly has a potential for impacts, and also giving some options to address things such as noise and trespass and litter. Seems like having that ability, even though it's not going to be used as a way to approve or deny use as a farm impact test, would at least provide some parameters with which those uses can be mitigated.
Mhm. And currently, do you feel like you are limited to address those issues? Sounds like you do feel that way.
To some extent, I think in many regards, we still end up providing some conditions to that effect, but there's some vulnerability there. That if they're challenged and we don't have the criteria to support it, having that criteria would be helpful in that regard.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. Lindsay Eichner.
Hi. We also have pretty much the same code that Austin read off. I think it came from the model code. So we have some older, long-standing farm stands, but we haven't actually utilized this new code very often. I think we've got 2 applications since we've adopted the code, and it's been pretty easy to navigate, really focusing on kind of life safety of access, and working with transportation planning on if there's going to be any large events, say in one day or over a weekend, that the farm stand is putting on, and they're needing some queuing in the road, that they also coordinate with transportation planning and get a facility permit, and just trying to make sure that the conversations are happening so that the property owners know all the different permits that they would need. But we haven't gotten any complaints for the approved farm stands that we've utilized the parking standards for.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Mike, Graham, Emily, Samantha, and Alice.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that we don't talk enough about is, I think, the opportunity for farmers markets in town. And I would wish that there may be some subsidies for that, but I would wish that the Oregon Department of Agriculture would incentivize and subsidize farmers markets in town. That's where the people are, and it's a really good opportunity. The other thing about it is it takes some of the stress off the farming areas. And also what we're hearing in Hood River County, particularly in Parkdale, is that some of the local businesses are complaining quite a lot. They paid commercial prices for their buildings. They think they're in the right zone, doing the right thing, and they're being outcompeted by the people in the farm zone that have essentially restaurants. And so there's sort of an unfairness there, really, for people that are trying to do the right thing in the right zone.
Okay.
And we also just the one thing I think we can do is, the more connection there is for farm stands to sell their own products and not everything else, the greater chance there is they're small and have less impacts on everybody around them.
Okay. Good. All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. This is great. Graham, then Emily.
I just wanted to share a few things regarding our pumpkin patch we do in the fall, which is arguably our busiest time of the season. You know, lots of traffic, lots of people in and out. And fortunately, we do not have any issues with people parking along the road, which is Sunnyview Road. Part of that is there's a ditch on either side of the road. It's about 3 to 4 feet deep. There's just not a good place to park.
No,
and that's never been an issue. And you know, the picture that Michael shared, that is concerning, you know, and as much as possible, it'd be great if the adjoining farmers could get together and work out a solution, you know, because that's not great. And ultimately, the one running the farm stand should be responsible for providing parking on his property, as a lot of the planners were saying. We've never gotten any complaints from any of our neighbors, never had any spillover or trespassing. You know, we do have good defined property lines and try to keep a lot of our entertainment away from it. That being said, on one side of our property, we have a 1/4 mile long gravel driveway going up to our personal residences. And that driveway is a shared driveway. Actually, half of it belongs to our next door neighbor, and the other half is ours. So we both share that driveway. And on the right side of that driveway, our property, we allow parking there in October for our pumpkin patch. And so what we do on the left side of the driveway, our neighbor has about an 80-acre grass seed field. Well, in October, it's mowed. I mean, that looks like an 80-acre parking lot.
Oh,
our customers. So what we did, we knocked on our neighbor's door and asked him, can we put up a temporary fence along our property and yours, just T-posts and ribbon? And he said yes. And we just keep it up for the month of October. We've never had anyone drive on his farm because of that. And then we take it down right away.
nice.
And once again, I want to really emphasize the working together with your neighbors. You know, don't just go straight to land use or, you know, police or whomever. You know, try to work with your neighbors. They want to see you succeed as well. You know, they're not out to get you or vice versa, you know, and maybe you have, Michael, and if you haven't gotten good response, you know, that's very frustrating, and I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, great. Thank you, Graham. Appreciate that. Emily, and then Samantha, Alice, Sid, and back to Austin.
I just want to start and say that growth, I think, is essential. And I think that farm stands should have the ability to grow their operation. I think that people can do so in a sustainable manner, but I don't think that the growth of our tulip festival and our farm has had a negative impact on our community. I think it has had an exponential impact on our community. And it is something that we continue to give back to our neighbors. We continue to give back to our schools and our cities, and we find ways to work together and communicate and bring awareness to an area that has so much potential. And there's businesses that are in our area that get so much more. The McDonald's. I know that it's McDonald's, but like they used to put signage up and say Tulip Festival information here. And April was their biggest month of the year because they capitalized on the fact that they knew people wanted to stop there, learn about the Tulip Festival before coming to our farm. And then after they visit our farm, they can go to a variety of other locally small owned businesses in the area. With that, I think that again, going back to growth, we started in the 80s as a 6-car traffic jam when our neighbor said, hey, you should open the field to the public. And did that in turn through social media and just us working our butts off year after year to have over 100,000 people on our property in a month. It did. And I don't think that farm stands should be limited. But I do agree that I think that there should be some standards that are in place or something that indicates as growth happens, it's important for your county planners to be aware of what's going on. We did see complaints, unlike Graham. So, Graham, you're lucky in that one.
Right.
We did see complaints. Because we acknowledged we had a problem. We were kind of like what those pictures of Keokau orchards of cars parking on the side of the road and people in ditches. And we had a neighbor who said, my grandfather could have a heart attack and I would have no way to take him to the hospital right now. And that was his big point of contention. And so that's where we worked with our county. We hired a traffic management system. We worked really hard with our governor the last year to get a 4-way stop up at 211 and Meridian for the safety of our guests and our community. I think communication is a huge piece here. I think that it's, again, communication with your county and your cities, but I think it's communication with your neighbors and your local farmers. And we don't know it all. Mistakes happen. I think that if you're frustrated with your neighbor because of an ag practice or their agritourism operation, I think that you should be the one to also just reach out and say, hey, I have a problem here. Can we come and can we talk? Can we sit down and can we talk? The only other thing I guess I have is, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Emily. All right. Communication. Got it. All right. Thank you. Samantha.
Sure, I'll be brief. Quickly, I just wanted to correct myself from earlier. Said it was actually Jim and Thousand Friends that showed the photos of the ground during the session. So I just want my comments to be corrected there and apologize for getting you and Jim mixed up. But then moving on to
this one.
I want to echo what Emily and Graham were just saying. With most of the folks that I represent, there have been and are more than willing to work not only with their neighbors, but they're also county planning and their county roads department and the local sheriff's office to make sure that they're not having any public health or safety issues with traffic or parking. One of just the things I want to flag is like there is a difference between people not being able to use roads and things being annoying or inconvenient. But we are talking about public roadways, and so no one owns a public roadway. It's different when we get into a public health or safety issue. It's another thing if things are inconveniencing or being inconveniencing. And one of the things I think that this comes from is somewhat of a misunderstanding, or maybe we have differences of opinion of what EFU zoning was supposed to be. are really supposed to ensure. And if you look at goal 3, it's around having a strong agricultural enterprise. And so to Emily's point earlier, a farm stand that's growing and having a lot of customers and having farms who have a lot of customers coming out doing direct to consumer sales are a sign of a strong agricultural enterprise. That's strong businesses. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any sideboards here. That's why when we ran our bill this session, we actually included into statute that if you're going to have events, if you're going to be drawing people out, you should have to do a parking and management plan. And we agree that that should be what people are doing and have best practices. I just don't know if DLCD honestly has the ability to codify that into rule, given that this is a sub 1 use. And I think that this probably needs a statutory change to be able to require additional conditions or any sort of an impacts analysis.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Samantha. And I think that, you know, one of the things I think I heard Hillary saying last time is that there's also the opportunity for some of these ideas not necessarily to be rule, but to be guidance, right? So there is a way to give guidance to folks about how to think about these things so that your farm stand can be successful and successfully supporting the local farming enterprise, as you're just saying. So really great ideas here. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for helping to, you know, stay focused on how do we support this? How do we support this in a way that makes sense for everybody? Not just for the individual farmer, but for their neighbors as well, the county as well. So this is great. Thank you. Alice next, and then Sid, Austin, and Jim.
Yeah, thanks for all of the things that folks have shared. I asked this question of my farmer community in an office hours that we hosted last week, and requiring impact tests for all farm stands is not something the farmers that I've spoken to are in favor of, but they expressed an interest in additional requirements or permit conditions, parking lots, time ticketing, et cetera, for farm stands that have a certain number of average visitors per day or on a weekly basis. I think that we as a group should consider what these thresholds should be, and I would like to see clear and consistent delineations of the difference between a large and small farm stand, because it sounds like there are different impacts for those two things, and we all kind of have it in our heads, like what a small farm stand looks like and what a large farm stand looks like, but there's no definitions there. There's no threshold to cross. I think that my farmers have also expressed that additional requirements being imposed because there are problems with enforcing current requirements, or that current permit holders have problems that are not being adequately addressed is not something that they're interested in. They don't want to see additional requirements imposed if the problem is that current permits are not being fulfilled, like not being faithfully executed by the people who hold them. The issues that Mike described seem really serious. I could see how someone could get hit on that road, and that seems really frustrating and dangerous, and I understand your concern. And as a business owner, you are responsible for making sure your business is in compliance, and if it's causing a big problem for your neighbors, we would like to see additional technical assistance from DLCD or from counties. I know that capacity is incredibly limited, so that's really difficult. But additional guidance regarding best practice and creative solutions, like some of those described by the farmers on the call, could be good. Also, perhaps there are things that we could do in the upfront permitting process, like mitigation plans for growth being required as like some advanced planning built into the permit application, like saying, hey, if you get to this size, what's your plan for X, Y, and Z? Or when a business obtains a permit, they should be informed of thresholds where they would need to put in additional parking or facilities or seek an addition to their permit. I would also like to see some standardized options for mediation between farmers. That's something we talk about a lot in like the seed growers and pinning systems that FOF works with our seed growers on, and mediation should be a tool that's available in this space too before we go into an enforcement space. So yeah, those are all my thoughts. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So many great ideas you all have. Hillary, you don't have too much to be thinking about with all this, right? This is what you're asking for. This is great.
No, these are great ideas.
Yeah, these are great ideas. Sid, Austin, and Jim. And then we'll move to that what's next and what DLCD's got planned next. So Sid, please.
So listening to the county planners, I heard Justin talking about the farm stand application that came across his desk for a 1,900 square foot building. And Maitri talking about the desire to maybe have a impacts test for the larger applications. And I think Eric talked about that, something along those lines as well. But I kind of went in a similar direction as Alice for some of this. I think LCDC could adopt by rule a definition of farm stands that says a farm stand is a building of up to X square feet, say it be it, 600 square feet, 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet, and require a impacts test for, the sub 2 impacts test for anything larger, or require them to apply as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use, which would trigger that greater level of review. Similarly, LCDC could state by rule that a farm stand may hold up to, the number I would settle on would be 6 promotional events a year because to promote retail items sold at the farm stand, because in the agritourism statute, once you get beyond or to six or beyond in a calendar year, that triggers a higher level of review or more stringent criteria in the agritourism statute. So that's the recognition in the statute already, a different section of the farm statute, that when you have more frequent events, that does increase the likelihood of adverse impacts or adverse effects. And so those are just a few ideas that came into my head as I was listening to the county planners.
Yeah, nice. Very helpful. That's great. Thank you, Sid. Good. Hillary, did you want to ask something or say something?
No, I just wanted to clarify, Sid. So you're suggesting adopting dimensional standards or like event thresholds, event frequency thresholds that would trigger maybe speaking to Emily's earlier idea about, or Alice's earlier idea about sort of stages of development planning for, growth of a business that would trigger review of health, life, safety standards applied to that farm stand at some point. Am I getting that right?
Well, I was not thinking in terms of what I was thinking in terms of was the farm impact standards that apply to sub 2 uses, so that LCDC could define by rule a farm stand is a building selling local farm products of up to 1,200 square feet in size. Larger farm markets would require review as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. LCDC could adopt by rule a standard that says a farm stand may conduct up to 6 promotional events a year to promote retail items sold to promote farm produce sold at the farm stand. And then if they want more than that, it would have to go to a agritourism permit, which would
or have an impacts analysis, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Austin and then Jim.
Thanks. So I was hopping on here to kind of talk about what Graham said and what I liked about that. Then Sid started speaking, and I also liked everything he had to say. Basically, I think that's a good idea to explore is, well, do we want to have a dimensional standard, 1,000 square feet, and then you're going to do a conditional use review at that point. I think that's a good idea to look at. I think there might be some problems with that because you could have 2 different operators operating 1,000-foot farm stand or 1,000 square foot farm stands, and one could have a really big impact and one could really not have an impact based on the seasonality of what they're selling and all those sorts of things. So that's why farm stands get complicated, because you get seasonality of crops and how different people operate them and all those sorts of things. But what I really wanted to say, just to wrap it up quickly, is I liked what Graham talked about with his solution to the shared driveway. And I think that is kind of the overarching thing with farm stands, in my opinion, is that sometimes they just need really simple solutions, simple, non-complicated, just working together, figuring out what's going to work on the farm, what's going to work for your property and the neighbors and whatnot. And you don't have to make it more complicated than it is. And so I think that's sort of how the farm stand code should be. It should be relatively simple, easy to navigate, and easy to look at it and know where you fall into it. So that's kind of what I had to say. Yeah, I remember when I started at Marion County, there was like a front page article about Graham's blueberry farm and how cool it was and all that stuff he did with his family. So that was like cool to see, and cool to see him still being successful with no issues really going forward. So it's fun to see him on here and whatnot. So that's a cool little piece. Shout out to you, Graham. Hope it's all going well.
That's awesome. So look for simple working together solutions. And what I'm hearing from folks is, and there are lots, what I'm hearing is there are many farm stands that are doing terrific stuff. They seem to be in compliance. They seem to be serving their communities. They seem to be working with their neighbors and their counties. And there are some that aren't.
And I would say most of them, at least for Marion County, I think most counties, I don't know if it's the biggest issue that they face, but most of them seem to be doing pretty dang good.
Yeah. So it's, when Alice added on, and, let's add in here this idea of mediation between farmers, having that available or encouraged as a step between going well, not going well, going to court, right? So maybe something in there in between that still can get at creative solutions, right? So super. Okay, thank you for all of this, Jim, and then I'll go to Hillary. Oh, sorry, Hillary, do you want to ask?
Just maybe after Jim, I was wondering if Lindsay maybe wanted to say something about ODA's agricultural mediation program.
Yeah, nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. And whether that meant fit.
And whether that is, yeah.
First off, I just wanted to say to Graham, hey, Graham, I grew up in Marion County. I think I picked strawberries on your farm in the days before they banned kids from going out and working on farms. And I still go out to your farm stand when I'm in Salem, because I've always kind of thought it was the epitome of what a farm stand should be. So I just wanted to say that to Graham before I go into. So earlier on, it was stated that that LCDC couldn't do some of these things because of statutory requirements about regulating a sub one use. I talked to my attorney about that. We disagree with that, and I would encourage DLCD staff to look into that. When you look at Lane County versus LCDC 1997, the Supreme Court ruled that LCDC can be more restrictive on sub one uses. They can regulate, they can define. It's counties that cannot be more restrictive. And so what that court case did was distinguish between the Brentmar case and the new language in the Lane County case that the Supreme Court adopted in 1997. So I would really encourage you on staff at DLCD to look at that. We believe LCDC does have the authority to regulate sub one uses. Just look at the high value farmland regulations, which came from rule, not from statute. And that's a great example right there of how that works. And so I would just, I'll end with that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Jim. And the citation even, right? Good.
And I can give you the exact citation if you need that, Hillary, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do, thanks. But I appreciate that you have those legal citations on the top of your head.
I know, right? Okay, so Lindsay, we were wondering if you might want to say something about the ODA's mediation program.
Yeah, so OD does have the authority, and we have had some dollars for a farm mediation program. We essentially keep a list of licensed mediators and refer all mediation claims to them. However, it does not appear that we will be able to continue that program, as it likely will not show up in our LAB. However, that doesn't mean that we will stop maintaining the list of agricultural mediators. So we still do that. And anytime we have people call, we can kind of recommend, based on the type of mediation that they're looking for, people that can do it, but we don't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And it does look like it won't be maintained. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that update on that. Sorry that you're losing that program.
It's okay.
Yeah, unfortunate. Peter, Mike, and then I'm gonna wrap it up because we were supposed to have 15 minutes for updates and next steps, and Hillary's just gonna have to talk faster when we get there, but I want to make sure. Peter, go ahead.
Yep. Mediation is a better option than litigation, but prevention from issues arising in the first place is what we should aspire to. And if we can try to get our rules clear enough that it prevents those issues from happening in the first place, we're all going to be better off.
Great. Okay. So clarity can get us there. Nice. A nice cry there at the end for some clarity. Yeah, Mike? And
Quickly,
then
along that same line, you know, in my situation here, this is not the only situation in our area that's a problem. It's everywhere. And I don't believe it's the responsibility of the neighboring farmer to bring people into compliance. That's what we pay DLCD for. And it's time they step up and do their job. We don't have the time. If you actually farm, you do not have the time, spend a lot of time mediating with your neighbor. And I think that's really insulting to expect the neighbors to bring people into compliance. That's just wrong.
okay. All right. Thank you for that. Very helpful. And so with that, that's going to wrap up the conversation. And I'm going to now turn to Hillary to take us into that next steps and wrap us up for between now and the next meeting.
All right. Well, thanks so much, folks. This has been a really, really great conversation today. We covered a lot of area. And I appreciate that we have a great group here with a variety of different perspectives, and we're able to have a really productive conversation. So as always, you're part of the RAC because we want to hear from you. And if something occurs to you after this meeting or you didn't feel comfortable sharing today, please send us written comments. We want to hear from you. You can also schedule a call for me. That also works. So particularly on the topics covering today, if you have other thoughts on how you distinguish between processed farm crops and livestock and prepared foods, how you distinguish between products packaged or served on site for consumption, if you have thoughts on sort of, whether we should consider some language around food products that are made primarily with local farm products and distinguishing those from prepared foods or processed farm crops. And I am going to follow up with Alice and Austin and Lindsay and get those definitions from you guys to include in the meeting notes. And again, on our second topic, we heard, a lot about some health life safety issues, noise, traffic, on-site parking and maneuvering, glare, trespassed. We had some creative ideas about staged emissions, coordinating with public works departments, mediation, and other tools besides enforcement. And it would be really great to hear more on that. Look at how counties are doing that in their code based on our model. And we'll definitely have some conversations internally and with our council about what are the extent of our authorities. So again, we'd love to hear more from you in providing those written comments. If you could provide those written comments by July 3rd, Thursday, end of day on July 3rd, that would be great. If you do that, then they'll be included in the packet for the July 18th meeting, and that will give us time to consider those comments as we're preparing the agency sort of proposal that we'll be talking about on July 18th. So if you missed it in the materials packet for today, at the end of that packet, there was a 5-page document going over 7 of the issues that we talked about in our first 2 meetings. And again, our intent was to get those out sooner in order to allow you guys a little bit more time to review those and to provide us written feedback on that. So if you have thoughts on that sort of initial take on those I think it's about 7 topics. We would love to hear those again before July 3rd, so we can integrate that into the proposal that'll go into the packet for the July 18th meeting. So just to kind of touch on some of those, we propose some language for consideration that clarifies when a farm stand is a farm use and when it would require a farm stand permit. We are proposing a very slight definitional change to local agricultural area. We received a lot of comments on this topic. And here on this particular one, I would just note if we don't propose a modification to language in our notice, LCDC would be precluded from considering a modification. We have some ideas on language in that packet, in that document on language clarifying the relationship between retail items and farm crops and livestock sold at the farm stand. There's some language in there clarifying the relationship between promotional activities and farm stand products, including examples. And there's some language in there that attempts to clarify that educational activities are included as promotional activities. And we did also include some language suggestions that would explicitly allow temporary structures for sheltering. So if you haven't already, take a look through some of our thoughts on those issues that were raised in the first 2 meetings and send us written comments before July 3rd to make sure that that gets into our proposal for our July 18th meeting.
Okay. And thank you for highlighting for everyone, Hillary, that there are some things you have to add that if you're going to add anything, you have to add it in the draft. You can't add it later, right? So you can take away, but you can't add it.
That's right.
What you say? Okay.
Once the notice of rulemaking is issued by the Secretary of State, the Land Conservation and Development Commission may modify language that's been noticed. They may choose not to adopt language that's been noticed, but they can't add new items that were not noticed. So I just wanted to be clear that. So anything that's not in the proposal that comes out from the Secretary of State, LCDC can't add to it.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I think that's helpful just for everybody to understand the rules of the road process wise. So what you see in there may be to keep the conversation alive as opposed to making just a firm cut right now. So, okay. All right. So look at the meeting summary. Make sure you get things in by July 3rd. The reason July 3rd is so that staff can read it, review it, and include ideas from what you're sending them into the next draft that they're going to be sharing on the 18th. It gives them time to read it, analyze it, contemplate it, and do something with it. And then we'll have it at least a week early. So if people can continue to digest, please look at what's there already. So you can be thinking that through. Okay. All right. Anything, do you have another slide or is that it?
So that is it. Again, this was a really great conversation today, folks. I'm really appreciative. I just want to recognize that everybody is volunteering their time to serve on this RAC. A lot of people. A lot of very busy humans out there, and I appreciate that your time is a gift that you've devoted to this effort and this topic. Just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you all for bearing with us. I know for some people, hearing people getting into it with each other can be really uncomfortable, and I appreciate that you all stuck with it. I appreciate that you had the interchanges that you did. It's a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you to staff for getting us so well prepared in advance of today's meeting. And we will take to heart the comments that you made about where we hadn't necessarily been as prepared before. So thank you so much, everybody. It is now 3:58. You now have 2 extra minutes of your day. Thank you, and we'll see you on July